The heat hit me like a physical force as I stepped out of the Land Rover. 3 months into the worst drought Kruger National Park had seen in decades, and the landscape had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Where lush vegetation once thrived, only withered brown scrub remained. Watering holes had shrunk to muddy puddles or disappeared entirely. The usually bustling savanna had grown eerily quiet as animals retreated deeper into the bush in desperate search of water. I'd been tracking this particular male lion for almost 6 hours. Wildlife conservation wasn't just my job, it was my life's work. After 15 years as a field researcher specializing in big cat behavior, I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing had prepared me for the sight that greeted me when I finally found him. He was young, probably around 4 years old, and clearly separated from his pride. His once magnificent mane hung limp and matted around his gaunt face. His ribs pressed sharply against his dull coat, and his movements were slow, unsteady, but it was his eyes that struck me most. Once, fierce amber orbs, now glazed with exhaustion and, if I wasn't anthropomorphizing, a quiet resignation. Protocol dictated non-interference with wildlife, even during extreme conditions. Let nature take its course, was the mantra drilled into every researcher and park ranger. Droughts were natural population control's harsh but necessary ecological resets. We were observers, not interventionists. But as I watched him through my binoculars, struggling to even lift his head, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just any lion. This was LM-217, part of a research pride I'd been monitoring since he was a cub. I'd documented his first hunt, his eventual separation from his natal pride, his successful establishment of territory. And now I was about to document his death from dehydration. The decision I made next would upend my career, my understanding of these magnificent predators, and ultimately change the course of my life. My name is Dr. Nathan Foster. This is what happened on that scorching afternoon in Kruger National Park and the extraordinary events that followed. I reached for the emergency water supply in my vehicle, 5 gallons I always carried for personal use during long research expeditions. Park regulations explicitly prohibited providing water to wildlife during droughts. Interfering with natural selection processes could have cascading ecological impacts, disrupting the delicate balance of predator-prey relationships. I knew this. I'd written papers on this very topic. Yet I found myself unscrewing the cap of a water bottle, my hands operating independently of my professional judgment. LM-217, I'd never named him, maintaining scientific distance, was barely responsive as I approached, a sign of how severely compromised his condition had become. A healthy lion would never allow a human this close. Keeping low and moving slowly, I stepped toward him, bottle extended, his head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as he caught my scent. A weak growl rumbled in his chest, a final feeble defense mechanism. "Easy," I murmured, knowing my voice meant nothing to him but finding comfort in it nonetheless. "I'm trying to help." He made no move to retreat or attack as I knelt several feet away and poured water into the bottle cap, then set it down and backed away. For several long moments, he didn't move, eyeing the offering with suspicion or perhaps simple confusion. Then, urged by primal need, he dragged himself forward and lapped at the small pool. It disappeared instantly down his parched throat. I poured more, this time directly from the bottle, creating a small stream he could access more easily. He drank with increasing desperation, his rough tongue working frantically to capture every drop. I emptied the first bottle, then a second. By the third, his drinking had slowed, become more deliberate. Some vitality seemed to return to his eyes, along with something else, awareness of me, of the unnatural situation, of the shifting dynamic between predator and prey. I should have retreated then, returned to my vehicle, documented the encounter, and reported my violation to park authorities. Instead, I remained crouched just feet away from one of nature's most efficient killers, watching his strength gradually return with each swallow of water. What happened next defied everything I understood about wild lion behavior. LM-217 finished drinking, raised his head, and looked directly at me, not with aggression or fear, but with what I could only describe as focused attention. He held my gaze for several heartbeats, then deliberately stepped toward me. Every instinct screamed for me to retreat, to create distance between myself and the approaching predator. Yet something in his demeanor kept me rooted in place. He wasn't stalking or threatening. His movements, though still weakened, carried a different intention. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel his breath, smell the distinctive musk of his coat, close enough that he could have taken my life with a single swipe of his massive paw. Instead, he lowered his head and did something that sent a chill down my spine despite the oppressive heat. He pressed his forehead briefly against my outstretched hand, a gesture remarkably similar to how lions greet members of their pride, before turning away and walking with steadier steps toward the shade of a distant acacia tree. I remained frozen, my hand tingling where his rough mane had brushed against it, my mind struggling to process what had just occurred. In 15 years of field research, I'd never witnessed or even heard of such behavior from a wild lion. It was as if he had acknowledged what I'd done, impossible as that seemed. When I finally regained my composure enough to return to my vehicle, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the lion now resting in the distance. My hands shook as I made notes in my field journal, trying to document the encounter with scientific objectivity while knowing I would never report the full extent of what had happened. Who would believe me? Who wouldn't question my professional judgment, my observational reliability, my mental stability even? I decided to record only that I had observed LM-217, noted his compromised condition, and would return to check his status the following day. The water, the approach, the impossible moment of connection, these I kept to myself, a secret lodged between scientific knowledge and inexplicable experience. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, I reluctantly started the engine. Research protocol required me to maintain a broad patrol pattern, not focus exclusively on a single subject. I had other monitoring locations to check before darkness fell. "Hang in there," I whispered, though he was too far away to hear. "I'll be back tomorrow." I had no way of knowing that tomorrow would bring circumstances beyond anything I could have imagined, that my small act of intervention would trigger a chain of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about these magnificent predators, that the line I'd crossed between observer and participant would permanently alter not just my research but my fundamental understanding of the complex consciousness of the creatures I devoted my life to studying. As I drove away, glancing in my rearview mirror at the lion's recumbent form, I couldn't have anticipated that within 24 hours I would find myself in a situation so extraordinary, so unprecedented, that it would ultimately divide the wildlife research community and force a re-examination of our entire approach to conservation ethics. I couldn't have known that the real story was only beginning. The drought intensified over the next day. Park authorities issued emergency protocols, restricting visitor access to certain areas and stepping up anti-poaching patrols. Desperate wildlife often meant opportunistic poaching, as animals gathered around the few remaining water sources, becoming easy targets. I spent a restless night at the research camp, replaying the encounter in my mind, questioning my actions and their potential consequences. Had I simply projected human characteristics onto an animal's random behavior? Had dehydration and heat exhaustion affected my reliable observation? Or had something genuinely extraordinary occurred between human and lion on that scorched savanna? Morning brought no clarity, only an urgent need to return to LM-217's location. I logged a vague research route with camp headquarters and set out at dawn, my vehicle loaded with additional water supplies, though I wasn't sure what I intended to do with them. What I discovered upon reaching the previous day's coordinates would be only the first shock of many on a day that would permanently alter the trajectory of my career, my research, and my understanding of these magnificent predators I thought I knew so well. Dawn painted the savanna in pale gold as I returned to the coordinates where I'd left LM-217. My stomach tightened with dread when I didn't immediately spot him beneath the acacia where he'd been resting. Had he succumbed to his weakened condition overnight, or perhaps wandered off in search of his pride? I scanned the area through binoculars, methodically sweeping the landscape. Nothing. I was about to expand my search perimeter when movement caught my eye, not at the acacia, but much closer to my vehicle. LM-217 was approaching from the east, moving with purpose. The difference in his condition was remarkable. Though still undernourished, his gait showed renewed strength, his head was held higher, his eyes alert. The water had clearly made a difference, but it couldn't fully account for this transformation. More shocking was his deliberate approach toward my vehicle. Wild lions typically avoid human presence. Even those habituated to safari vehicles maintain a wary distance. Yet LM-217 was walking directly toward me with focused intent. I remained inside the Land Rover, engine running, ready to depart if his behavior turned aggressive. Through the open window, I documented his approach with my camera, the rapid click of the shutter barely audible over my pounding heart. At about 20 feet from my vehicle, he stopped and sat on his haunches. Then, in a gesture that sent a chill through me, he looked directly into my eyes and vocalized not a roar or a growl, but a distinctive soft huffing sound lions used to locate pride members. He was calling to me. "This isn't possible," I whispered to myself, even as I watched it happening. For 5 minutes, he remained in that position, occasionally repeating the vocalization. When I made no move to exit the vehicle, he stood, circled once, then began walking away. After a few steps, he stopped, looked back at me, and huffed again. The realization struck me with stunning clarity. He wanted me to follow him. Every scientific principle, every safety protocol, every rational thought argued against leaving the protection of my vehicle. Yet I found myself switching off the engine and reaching for my emergency satellite beacon. If I was about to do something profoundly ill-advised, at least the research team could locate my remains. I placed the beacon in my pocket, grabbed my canteen and camera, and cautiously stepped out. LM-217 watched me intently, but made no aggressive moves. When I was fully out of the vehicle, he turned and began walking at a measured pace, stopping occasionally to ensure I was following. We traveled this way for nearly 2 kilometers, moving deeper into the bush than I would ever venture on foot in lion territory. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about territorial predators, ambush scenarios, and the complete violation of research protocols. Yet something stronger compelled me forward, scientific curiosity perhaps, or something more primal I couldn't yet name. The terrain changed as we walked, becoming rockier with scattered boulder formations rising from the parched earth. LM-217 led me toward one such formation, pausing at its base to look back at me once more before disappearing into what I now saw was a narrow opening between 2 massive rocks. I hesitated. Following a lion into a confined space represented a level of risk beyond mere professional recklessness. It was suicidal. I recorded a quick video message on my phone stating my location and actions, should the worst happen. Then, driven by a curiosity I couldn't suppress, I approached the opening. The gap between the boulders was narrow but navigable. Sunlight filtered through cracks above, providing enough illumination to reveal a natural pathway leading deeper into the formation. I could hear movement ahead, the soft pad of lion paws on stone. The passage opened into a small grotto, maybe 30 feet across. Filtered sunlight illuminated dust particles dancing in the air, creating slanted beams across the space. The temperature was notably cooler here, the air carrying a hint of moisture. What I saw next stopped me cold. In the center of the grotto lay 3 lion cubs, no more than 3 months old, huddled together on a bed of dried grass. Beside them, the unmistakable form of an adult female lion, motionless, her coat dull, sides sunken. Even from the entrance, I could see she was dead, likely from dehydration and exhaustion. LM-217 stood over the cubs, looking from them to me with what I could only interpret as desperate expectation. The implications crashed over me. This female must have been separated from the pride, perhaps driven to seek shelter in this hidden grotto as her condition deteriorated. The cubs, too young to hunt or find water for themselves, were slowly starving beside their mother's body, and LM-217, who by all normal lion behavior patterns should have either abandoned or killed cubs that weren't his, had instead sought help from the only source he now associated with water and survival, me. I approached cautiously, expecting the cubs to retreat in fear. Instead, they watched me with the same glazed lethargy I'd seen in LM-217 the previous day. They were close to death, their small bodies dehydrated, their movements minimal. Kneeling beside them, I unscrewed my canteen. LM-217 watched from a few feet away, making no move to prevent my interaction with the cubs. I poured water into my cupped palm, bringing it to the first cub's mouth. After initial hesitation, desperate thirst overcame fear. The cub lapped weakly at the water. I repeated the process with each cub, watching as the life-giving moisture revived them incrementally. Their eyes grew more focused, their movements more deliberate. By the time my canteen was half empty, all three were sitting up, their tiny pink tongues darting out to catch every precious drop. Throughout this extraordinary interaction, LM-217 remained nearby, watchful but calm. When the cubs had drunk their fill, he approached and lay down beside them, his massive body curled protectively around their small forms. The juxtaposition was striking, the powerful predator, now guardian to these vulnerable offspring that, by all natural law, should mean nothing to him. As a scientist, I grasped for explanations. Perhaps LM-217 was related to the dead lioness, a brother maybe, with enough genetic connection to trigger protective instincts toward her cubs. Or perhaps the extreme conditions of the drought had disrupted normal behavioral patterns, creating unprecedented alliances for survival. But as I watched him groom the cubs with gentle swipes of his tongue, another possibility emerged, one that challenged the neat categories of scientific understanding. What if there was more complexity to lion social behavior than we'd documented? What if, under certain circumstances, these predators were capable of compassion and caretaking beyond immediate kin selection and pride bonds? I knew what I needed to do, though it would likely end my career. These cubs required immediate intervention if they were to survive. I couldn't leave them here to die slowly, nor could I abandon LM-217 in his improbable role as their protector. Park protocols prohibited wildlife removal except under authorized conservation programs. Unauthorized intervention could result in criminal charges, professional blacklisting, and permanent expulsion from the research community. Everything I'd worked for could be lost, and yet the choice seemed suddenly, starkly clear. I reached for my satellite phone and dialed Dr. Amara Okafor, the park's chief veterinarian and, more importantly, my oldest friend in the conservation community. If anyone would understand the extraordinary circumstance I found myself in and potentially help without immediately reporting me, it would be Amara. She answered on the third ring. "Nathan, aren't you supposed to be in the field?" "Amara, I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "And I need you to come alone. What I'm about to tell you stays between us until we figure out what to do." There was a pause. "Then you know I can't make that promise without knowing what's happened." "I found 3 orphaned lion cubs," I said. "Their mother is dead. They'll die without intervention." "Protocol is clear, Nathan. Document and report too." "There's a male lion protecting them," I interrupted. The same lion I observed yesterday. He led me to them, Amara. Deliberately led me to these cubs." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Amara had known me for 12 years. She knew I wasn't given to exaggeration or flights of fancy. "That's not possible," she finally said, though her tone had changed. "I know, but I'm looking at it right now. I have video documentation." Another long pause. "What's your location?" I gave her the coordinates, emphasizing again the need for discretion. "No park vehicles, no uniforms. Just you and whatever medical supplies you can bring without drawing attention." "Nathan, if what you're describing is accurate." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken implications hanging between us. "I know," I replied quietly. "Trust me, I know exactly what this means. But these cubs need immediate help, and I need a witness to what's happening here, someone with credibility." "I'll be there in 2 hours," she said finally. "Don't do anything else until I arrive." As I ended the call, LM-217's amber eyes met mine. In that moment, something passed between us, an understanding that transcended the traditional boundaries between human and wild predator. I was about to cross a line from which there would be no return, potentially sacrificing my professional standing and credibility. But watching the lion tenderly nudging the cubs closer to his protective warmth, I knew with absolute certainty that I was witnessing something science had yet to fully document or explain, something that demanded both immediate action and careful study, something that might fundamentally change our understanding of these magnificent creatures. I settled in to wait for Amara, periodically offering more water to the increasingly responsive cubs. Outside the sheltered grotto, The unrelenting sun continued to punish the drought-stricken landscape. But here, in this improbable sanctuary, a different kind of natural law seemed to be asserting itself, one where survival meant cooperation across boundaries previously thought impermeable. What I couldn't yet know was how the events unfolding in this hidden grotto would soon capture the world's attention, sparking both wonder and controversy, and ultimately leading to discoveries that would challenge the very foundations of what we thought we understood about wild animal cognition, emotion, and social structures. The 2 hours waiting for Amara stretched like elastic. I alternated between documenting everything with my camera and offering small amounts of water to the cubs, who grew incrementally more active with each passing minute. LM-217 remained vigilant but remarkably calm, only occasionally rising to pace the perimeter of the grotto before returning to the cubs. When I heard footsteps approaching outside, LM-217's posture changed instantly. His muscles tensed, head lowered, a low warning growl rumbling from his chest. I moved slowly to the entrance, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "It's all right, she's here to help." Whether he understood my words or merely my non-threatening tone, his growl subsided, though his vigilance remained evident. Amara appeared at the entrance, freezing when she saw LM-217. Despite 15 years as a wildlife veterinarian, nothing had prepared her for the sight of a grown male lion sitting protectively near 3 cubs, with a human calmly positioned between them. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice tight with controlled fear, "don't make any sudden movements." "It's okay," I assured her. "He led me here. He's been like this the whole time." Her expression conveyed profound skepticism, but professional training took over. Keeping her movements slow and deliberate, she entered the grotto, medical bag clutched tightly in one hand. "The cubs are dehydrated and malnourished," I explained, gesturing toward them. "The mother died recently, probably within the last day." Amara's gaze darted between me, the cubs, and LM-217, who watched her with intense focus but made no aggressive move. "This makes no sense," she said quietly. "Male lions don't protect cubs unless they're the father, and even then, it's not direct caretaking. They certainly don't bring humans to help." "I know," I replied simply. "Yet, here we are." Something in my tone must have conveyed the gravity of what we were witnessing. Amara's scientific skepticism battled visibly with the evidence before her eyes. Finally, professionalism won out. She approached the cubs slowly, medical instincts overriding fear as she assessed their condition. "They need more than water," she concluded after examination. "They're severely malnourished and showing early signs of organ stress. Without immediate intervention, they won't survive another day." The implication hung between us. Intervention meant removal from the wild, violation of park protocols, potential professional suicide for both of us. "What about him?" I nodded toward LM-217, who hadn't taken his eyes off Amara since she'd entered. She studied the male lion with the critical eye of a veterinarian. "Better than the cubs, but still compromised. The water you gave him helped, but he needs food and further hydration." We both knew what needed to happen, yet neither wanted to voice it first. The proper protocol, the only legal course of action, was to document the situation, report it to park authorities, and let nature take its course. Intervention was prohibited, except through official conservation programs, with proper oversight and authorization. "I can't leave them," I said finally. Amara closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, a decision had been made. "My vehicle has a climate-controlled compartment for wildlife transport. We could take the cubs to my private clinic." Officially, they were brought in by park rangers who found them abandoned. "And les Mikiuzonyade?" She shook her head. "A full-grown male lion? Impossible to transport secretly. The best we can do is leave food and water, then alert anti-poaching units to protect this area without specifying why." It was an imperfect solution, but likely the only viable one. Yet something in me rebelled against separating LM-217 from the cubs he had so improbably chosen to protect. "He sought help," I argued. "He recognized I could provide water, and he brought me to these cubs. That's unprecedented behavior. If we separate them, we lose the opportunity to document whatever is happening here." "What you're suggesting is impossible, Nathan. We can't create a secret lion sanctuary without authorization. Our careers, our freedom, everything would be at risk." She was right, of course. What I wanted to preserve this extraordinary situation for observation was professionally indefensible and logistically impossible. Yet as I watched LM-217 gently nudge one of the cubs that had strayed too near the grotto's entrance, a thought formed, radical, career, ending, but suddenly perfectly clear. What if we don't keep it secret? I asked slowly. What if we document everything and go public immediately? Amara stared at me. You can't be serious. Think about it. This behavior defies everything we've documented about wild lion social structures. It's not just scientifically significant, it's the kind of discovery that captures public imagination. I gestured toward LM-217. If we present this as a potential breakthrough in understanding lion cognition and behavior, the public support could create enough pressure to establish a special research dispensation. Or we could both be fired and possibly prosecuted before any public support materializes, Amara countered. You're gambling with both our careers. I'm already past that point, I admitted. The moment I gave him water yesterday, I crossed the line. But what's happening here is bigger than my career or yours. It could change how we understand these animals, how we approach conservation. The skepticism in her expression hadn't diminished, but a new consideration had joined it. The scientist in her recognizing the legitimacy of my argument, even as the professional calculated the risks. What exactly are you proposing? She asked finally. We document everything, video, photographs, detailed observations. We take the cubs for emergency care, but create a controlled environment where LM-217 can remain connected to them. We present our findings to Dr. Nkosi first. The park director, she interrupted. The man who suspended 3 rangers last year for moving a rhino calf 50 meters. He's a stickler for protocol. Yes, I acknowledged. But he's also a scientist at heart. If we present this as the research opportunity it is, with preliminary documentation already secured and a plan for rigorous observation, I let the sentence hang, knowing she understood the implications. Dr. Mojian Nkosi was indeed a strict administrator, but his background was in animal behavior research. If anyone could appreciate the scientific significance of what we were witnessing, it would be him. Amara was silent for a long moment, her internal calculation almost visible on her face. Finally, she sighed. If, and this is a massive if we do this, we need indisputable documentation and a contingency plan for when it all goes sideways. It wasn't full agreement, but it was enough. For the next hour, we worked methodically, recording video of LM-217's interactions with the cubs, documenting their conditions, collecting samples from the deceased lioness for later analysis. Throughout it all, LM-217 remained extraordinarily tolerant of our presence, though he grew noticeably anxious when we began preparing the cubs for transport. We need to move quickly, Amara urged as the smallest cub's energy began to flag again. They need medical intervention now. The moment of truth had arrived. We had to separate LM-217 from the cubs, at least temporarily. I approached him, maintaining eye contact, speaking in the same calm tone I'd used throughout. We're helping them, I said, knowing he couldn't understand my words but hoping my non-threatening demeanor would communicate enough. We'll bring them back. To my astonishment, he backed away as I gathered the first cub, watching intently but making no move to prevent me. Each cub was carefully placed in the specialized carrier Amara had brought, monitored for signs of distress. When all 3 were secured, we faced the final challenge, leaving the grotto with LM-217 still inside. He's not going to let us just walk out with them, Amara whispered. No matter how strangely he's behaved so far, she was probably right. No lion, however atypical its behavior, would likely allow cubs under its protection to be removed without resistance. I considered our options, each more problematic than the last. Before we could decide, LM-217 made the choice for us. He rose, stretched, and walked deliberately to the grotto entrance. There he paused, looking back at us, then disappeared outside. Did he just? Amara couldn't finish the sentence. Give us permission? Clear a path? I don't know, but we need to move now. We hurried from the grotto with the carrier between us, scanning frantically for LM-217. He was waiting several yards away, watching as we emerged with the cubs. The walk back to our vehicles was surreal. a human procession carrying lion cubs, with an adult male lion following at a measured distance. When we reached the vehicles, Amara quickly secured the carrier in her specialized transport compartment while I kept watch on LM-217, who had settled on his haunches about 30 feet away. "He's going to follow us," I said with sudden certainty. "That's impossible," Amara replied, though with less conviction than earlier. "He can't know where we're taking them." Yet as we drove away, my prediction proved accurate. LM-217 began loping after our vehicles, maintaining pursuit despite his weakened condition. After a kilometer, Amara stopped. "This is insane," she said. "He's going to kill himself trying to follow." I made a decision then that would either be the most profound breakthrough of my career or its definitive end. "We take him too. Have you lost your mind? We can't just—" "Look at him, Amara," I insisted. "Look at what he's doing. Everything about this situation defies what we thought we knew about lion behavior. If we leave him, he'll either die following us or return to a territory with no pride and no resources during the worst drought in decades." She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "And if we take him and this all goes wrong, if he attacks someone at the clinic, if Mikosi rejects your research proposal and brings charges, valid concerns, all of them." Yet watching LM-217's determined pursuit, I knew with bone-deep certainty that we were witnessing something unprecedented, something that demanded documentation and study, whatever the professional cost. "Then I'll take full responsibility," I said. "I'll state that I convinced you it was the only option for the cub's survival." Our eyes met a moment of silent communication born from years of friendship and professional respect. Finally, she gave a curt nod. "I'll call ahead to prepare the large enclosure. God help us both." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Using techniques normally reserved for wildlife relocation programs, we managed to sedate LM-217, transport him to Amara's private veterinary facility, and settle him in a secure enclosure adjacent to the cub's recovery space. By the time Dr. Nkosi arrived, summoned by my urgent call claiming a discovery of unprecedented scientific importance, the cubs were receiving intravenous fluids and LM-217 was beginning to stir from sedation. Nkosi's expression cycled through shock, outrage, and disbelief as I presented our documentation and explained the extraordinary chain of events. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. "You have violated at least 15 park regulations and several national wildlife protection laws. You've removed protected species from their natural habitat without authorization. You've interfered with natural processes. We've documented a behavioral phenomenon never before observed in wild lions." I interrupted a career-ending breach of protocol that demonstrated my desperation. A male lion seeking human assistance for orphaned cubs, not his own. Deliberate, goal-oriented communication between species. Please, doctor, watch the footage before you make your decision. For 3 tense hours, Nkosi reviewed our documentation, examined the cubs, observed LM-217's behavior through the security monitors, and questioned us with prosecutorial thoroughness. When he finally reached his conclusion, his expression was unreadable. "I am suspending both of you, effective immediately," he announced, "pending a full review by the park's Scientific Advisory Board and the Ministry of Environmental Affairs." My heart sank. It was the expected outcome, but the reality still stung. "However," he continued, surprising us, "I am also authorizing an emergency research protocol to document and study this situation. The preliminary evidence is compelling enough to warrant further investigation." He fixed us with a stern look. "To be clear, you both acted unconscionably and against explicit park policy. Under normal circumstances, this would end your careers, but these circumstances are anything but normal. It wasn't forgiveness or approval, but it was an unexpected reprieve, a recognition of the scientific significance that had driven our actions." What followed over the next 6 months became known in conservation circles as the Kruger Pride phenomenon. As the cubs recovered and grew stronger, LM-217, now officially designated KM-217 in research documentation, displayed caretaking behaviors previously undocumented in male lions, regurgitating food for the cubs, grooming them, even playing with them as they gained strength. More extraordinary was his continued tolerance of human presence. While never fully comfortable with anyone but me and eventually Amara, he allowed researchers to observe from a safe distance as the cubs developed. Genetic testing confirmed what we had suspected. The cubs were not his biological offspring. Further testing of the deceased lioness revealed she was likely from a neighboring pride that had been fragmented by the drought. How KM-217 had come to protect her cubs remained a mystery, though theories abounded among the growing research team assembled to document the unprecedented situation. The scientific papers we published generated both acclaim and controversy. Critics suggested we had witnessed an anomaly, a neurologically atypical lion whose behavior couldn't be generalized to the species. Others accused us of anthropomorphizing, of projecting human motivations onto instinctive animal behaviors. But as public interest grew fueled by carefully released video footage of KM-217's interactions with the cubs, so did support for our work. What had begun as a career-threatening violation of protocol evolved into a pioneering research program, studying the previously underestimated complexity of lion cognition and social bonds. Today, 3 years after that fateful encounter during the drought, the Kruger Cognition Project employs 12 researchers across multiple disciplines. The cubs, now young adults, have been successfully integrated into a monitored pride, KM-217, though still displaying atypical tolerance for human presence, has returned to a semi-wild state in a protected area of the park. And I find myself in the unexpected position of research director, my career not ended but transformed by that moment of compassion for a dying lion. Scientists still debate what exactly happened that day, what confluence of circumstances led a wild predator to seek human help, what neurological or hormonal factors might explain his unprecedented behavior. We may never fully understand the complex internal processes that drove his actions, but as I watch him now, patrolling the boundaries of his new territory with the powerful confidence of a fully recovered apex predator, I remember the moment he pressed his forehead against my hand after that first drink of water. Whatever science eventually determines about that extraordinary chain of events, I know with unshakable certainty that I witnessed something profound. A connection across species boundaries that challenges our understanding of animal consciousness. And it all began with a simple act of compassion, a man offering water to a thirsty lion under the merciless African sun.